Beyond the door, I can hear the muffled roar of thousands of voices blending together, the kind of restless hum you only hear before a major event begins. In a few minutes, I'll walk onto that stage as the keynote speaker of the largest leadership conference in the country. Cameras are set, lights are blazing, and somewhere out there are the very faces who once laughed at me, dismissed me, pretended I didn't exist. I smooth a strand of hair behind my ear and glance at my phone buzzing on the table. A notification flashes across the screen. Attendee check-in, Jonathan Miller, Grace Thompson, Dr. Roberts. My chest tightens. Those names. The people who once ignored my first speech, they're here tonight, seated in the front row. Funny how life works. The people who silenced me will now have no choice but to hear my voice echo across this arena. I take a slow breath, the smell of fresh coffee lingering in the air, and slip on my heels. My heart is pounding, but not with fear, with power. They ignored me once, but tonight I own the stage. I wasn't always this woman. Years ago, I was just Olivia, a nervous sophomore standing behind a wooden podium in my high school auditorium, clutching note cards that trembled in my hands. It was my first real speech. The topic was finding courage in failure. I had stayed up for nights perfecting it. Every word had been rehearsed in front of the bathroom mirror, my hairbrush serving as a microphone. I believed, maybe foolishly, that what I had to say mattered. But the truth? Nobody cared. I'll never forget that moment, standing under the harsh white lights, my throat dry as sandpaper, scanning the rows of restless students. Half of them were whispering, some scrolling through their phones, others laughing under their breath. My voice cracked halfway through, and instead of encouragement, I heard muffled chuckles. Even the teachers sitting along the sides looked distracted, one grading papers while another tapped at her laptop. The humiliation was suffocating. I felt invisible, small, like my words evaporated into the air before they even reached the ears of those in front of me. My chest burned with shame, and I wanted nothing more than to disappear. When I stumbled off the stage, I kept my head down. But as I rushed toward the exit, a wrinkled hand gently touched my shoulder. It was Mrs. Evelyn Carter, the school librarian, one of the only adults who ever made me feel seen. She pressed something into my palm, a small silver pen with tiny floral engravings. "Olivia," she whispered, her soft voice steady, "a voice ignored isn't a voice wasted."
Right. Speak.
Try again. Someday they'll listen. That pen became my anchor. It wasn't fancy, but every time I held it, I remembered her words. That night, I sat at my desk, tears smudging my notes, and made a silent promise. I will not let this be the last time I speak. If they won't listen now, one day, they will have no choice. It was the first spark of the fire that still burns in me today. The years after that humiliation weren't glamorous. They were raw, lonely, and heavy with self-doubt. In college, while most of my classmates were at frat parties or football games, I was tucked away in the quiet corner of the library, whispering my speeches under my breath, using Mrs. Carter's silver pen to scribble drafts in worn notebooks. I didn't even know if I had talent, but I had determination. And sometimes, that's enough to keep moving. There were nights I cried myself to sleep after practicing for hours, only to hate the sound of my own voice. I would close my laptop, curl under my blanket, and wonder, who am I kidding? No one cares what I have to say. But then came Professor Daniel Wright. He taught Communications 101, tall, graying at the temples, with the kind of voice that filled a room effortlessly. After one shaky classroom presentation, he asked me to stay back. "Olivia," he said, tapping the desk with his pen, "you have something most speakers don't, sincerity. You don't just talk, you mean it. That's rare. Don't waste it." His words stuck. From then on, he became my mentor. He pushed me, challenged me, even made me stand in front of an empty lecture hall just to practice projecting my voice to the last row. The journey wasn't easy. I worked 2 part-time jobs to cover tuition and speech workshops. I stumbled through competitions where I placed last, endured smirks from polished debaters who thought I didn't belong. Every setback scraped at my confidence. But slowly, small victories came. The first time a professor praised my class presentation. The first time a stranger came up to me after a student event and said, "Your words, they helped me." The first time I got invited to speak at a small community center, no stage, just a handful of folding chairs and a crackling microphone. But it was real. And with each step, I grew. I learned how to modulate my tone, how to tell stories that lingered in people's minds, how to stand tall even when my knees trembled. More importantly, I learned how to listen, to really connect with people instead of performing at them. I didn't tell my family much. To them, I was just Olivia studying communications. I didn't mention the nights I stayed awake rewriting speeches, the competitions I entered, the YouTube videos I uploaded secretly to practice reaching an audience. Maybe part of me wanted to shield my dream from their indifference until I was strong enough to defend it. Then, one spring afternoon, I received an email with the subject line, "Invitation, Regional Leadership Summit, Guest Speaker." I read it over and over, my heart pounding. It wasn't the biggest stage in the world, but it was the first real one. And as I stood there weeks later, looking out at an audience of 50 strangers leaning in to hear me, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The girl whose words were once ignored was finally being heard. The sound of the announcer's voice snapped me back to the present. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome tonight's keynote speaker, Olivia Hayes. The arena erupted in applause as I stepped onto the stage. The glare of the lights hit me, hot and blinding. But I didn't flinch. My heels clicked against the polished floor, echoing like a drumroll beneath my steady breath. And then I saw them. Front row. Jonathan Miller, the boy who once sat smirking while I stumbled through my high school speech. Grace Thompson, the girl who whispered and laughed as I tried to speak. And Dr. Roberts, the teacher who pretended I wasn't even worth listening to. For a moment, my stomach flipped. My younger self wanted to shrink back, to hide. But then, I remembered Mrs. Carter's pen nestled inside my clutch backstage, the weight of her words stitched into my soul. So I smiled. "Good evening," I began, my voice calm but strong, filling the vast hall. When I was 16, I gave my first public speech. I poured my heart into it. But no one listened. Students laughed. Teachers looked away, and I felt invisible. The crowd hushed, hanging on my every word. I paused deliberately, letting the silence stretch. My eyes flicked toward the front row. Jonathan shifted in his seat. Grace's smirk was gone. Dr. Roberts cleared his throat, suddenly fascinated by his program booklet. I continued. That night, I thought my voice didn't matter. But what I didn't know was that being ignored was the very thing that lit the fire in me. Because here's the truth. When the world refuses to hear you, you learn how to make them listen. A ripple of energy surged through the audience. I could feel it, the connection, the resonance. I wove my story into the keynote theme: resilience, leadership, the power of persistence. I spoke about late nights of practice, failures that carved out strength, mentors who pushed me forward. And all the while, I could feel their eyes on me. The people who once dismissed me now frozen, watching me command a stage they could never have imagined for me. Then came the moment. I leaned forward slightly, my voice soft but sharp enough to cut through the air. To anyone who has ever been silenced, overlooked, or laughed at, remember this: your worth is not defined by those who fail to see it. Because one day, the same people who ignored your voice may find themselves sitting in the front row, listening to every word you say.
Gasps.
Applause. A standing ovation rippled across the hall. And though I never said their names, the truth hung in the air like electricity. Jonathan's face flushed red, Grace shifted uncomfortably, and Dr. Roberts' jaw tightened. For once, they couldn't look away. As I closed my keynote, the spotlight bathing me in gold, I felt something deep inside, not revenge, but release. This was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right. And tonight,
I had.
After the keynote, the hall buzzed with energy. People lined up to shake my hand, to thank me, to snap photos. Compliments blurred together, inspiring, powerful, life-changing. But then, I saw them. Jonathan.
Grace.
Dr. Roberts. They hovered at the edge of the crowd, awkward, hesitant, like children waiting to be scolded. Their eyes didn't carry the arrogance I remembered, only unease. Finally, Jonathan stepped forward. "Olivia, that was incredible." I don't think I ever realized," his voice trailed off. Grace fiddled with her clutch, her eyes darting to the floor. "I shouldn't have. I mean, back then, we were kids." I laughed. "I know I did. And I'm sorry." Even Dr. Roberts, the man who never once acknowledged my effort, cleared his throat. "Miss Hayes, you've become quite the speaker. I suppose I underestimated you." For a moment, the younger me, the hurt, humiliated 16-year-old, wanted to bask in their regret. But the woman I am now knew better. Power wasn't about making them grovel. It was about choosing what came next. So I looked each of them in the eye. "Thank you," I said evenly. "But apologies only matter if they lead to change." Jonathan frowned. "Change?" "Yes," I said. "Jonathan, you were always quick to laugh at others. Maybe it's time you learn to listen instead. Support people instead of silencing them." His face softened. He nodded slowly. I turned to Grace. "You thrived on making others feel small. If you really regret that, lift people up now. Especially the ones who don't fit in. The ones you'd normally overlook." Grace swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. Finally, I faced Dr. Roberts. My voice stayed calm, but steady. "You were an educator, and you taught me the hardest lesson of all, how painful it is when a teacher looks away. If you want redemption, start seeing your students.
Really see them.
Believe in them before the world does." He lowered his gaze, guilt etched into his features. I let the silence linger, the weight of my words settling over them. Then I softened my tone. "I don't need revenge. I don't need validation. What I need and what the world needs is for people like you to do better. So, if you want a place in my life now, those are my conditions." They nodded, subdued. Not out of obligation, but because they knew I was right. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. The balance of power had shifted completely. I no longer needed them, but they, whether they admitted it or not, needed me. In the days that followed the conference, something unexpected happened. Jonathan sent me a message, a photo of him volunteering at a youth mentorship program, captioned, "Learning to Listen." Grace started posting about women-owned startups she was supporting, using her platform for encouragement instead of mockery. Even Dr. Roberts, the man I thought would never change, wrote me an email describing how he'd begun inviting quieter students to share their voices in class.
People really could change if they chose to.
But whether they changed or not, I had already won. One evening, after the whirlwind of interviews and congratulations slowed down, I sat alone in my apartment overlooking the city. The skyline glittered, headlights tracing rivers of light below. On the table beside me lay Mrs. Carter's silver pen. I picked it up, running my thumb over its tiny floral engravings. I remembered that night so clearly, 16, humiliated, ignored. And how this very pen became a reminder that silence isn't the end, it's only the beginning. A tear slipped down my cheek, not from sadness, but from gratitude. Every laugh, every dismissive glance, every time my voice was drowned out, it all led me here. And the truth hit me like a steady flame in my chest.
I never needed them to listen back then.
I needed me to keep speaking until the world was ready. I smiled, setting the pen down gently. Tomorrow, I'd prepare for my next keynote in a city halfway across the country. Thousands of strangers waiting, ready to hear what I had to say. I leaned back, breathing in the quiet night, and whispered to myself, almost like a vow. They ignored my speech once, but now, the world listens.